If you all want to do your stop videos like I'm going to do right now, that way you don't see me or we don't see you. So anyway, go ahead, Mal.
Okay, well, listen, great to be with you again. Even though it's been a few times, I think it's actually been 4 over the years. And the first time I came, I think was 2006 or 7. We were talking about that before. Anyway, it's great that we're both still around. That's the good news these days, needless to say. Anyway, glad to be with you this evening. We're going to talk only about Macrophyllas and Serratas. As you know, the Serratas are very close cousins. So they have a very close relationship, the Macrophyllas and the Serratas. And we'll comment about some of that speciality as we go along tonight. So what we're talking about is pruning, of course. And what I'm going to do is cover it. We've done the seasonal step approach. We find that we've broken down pruning into specific events, make them somewhat singular in their purpose and their time of action. And we find that it's a whole lot better for folks this way, that they really catch on with it and do a pretty good job of it too. So they're all important. And I think some of you have heard some of this from me before, but it's been a while. So I always look at it this way: repetition at its best is a form of reinforcement. So we shall go with that in terms of our purpose tonight. As Linda said, I do have 3 slides that I stuck in for questions at certain specific points, and so we'll try to deal with those. And I'm happy to try to answer all your questions, even if it's not pruning. We'll save those, though, if you wish, general cultural issues to the end. I think that's the smarter thing to do. Okay? Hope we're good with that. All right. So, seasonal step approach, and of course, we know the 6 most common of our species, and I've listed those, as you can see in the top with the gray background: the anomalous, the climbers, the arborescens, the quercifolias, and the paniculatas. And we all know those, and we all do very well with them. Great plants to grow. Certainly your quercifolias are a lot better than mine in your climate, but I might duke you out in the rest of them. You know, our weather is a good deal different. I am tonight make some relationships to what we do here, but I'm trying to do a total speak in Memphis area. Okay, I've been to your areas a number of times. I think I got a reasonable idea of your weather and time of year, so that's what we're going to try to do. So again, we're going to concentrate on the lower 2, the Serratas and the Macrophyllas. These are the 3 steps for the Macs and the Serratas. So step 1 is regenerative pruning, and these are your dates. These are the Memphis dates. You're past it now for step 1, but I'm going to share it with you tonight, so it's something you can put in your notebook for something to do next 2022, January or February. It's a very important one too, and I think you'll see that. Detail pruning, which is really cleaning up winter kill on the top of your plants, that's now for you. In fact, you got to get it done, I suspect, pretty soon, because I'm sure you've leafed out pretty well. Here, we're just starting. So we're at this time of the year at Cape Cod, we're 4 to 5 weeks, sometimes 6 weeks behind you. So it's quite a difference in the calendar's timetable. And then step 3 here is pinch pruning, late June, July. We both do it the same way. For us, it's more July. For you, it's June. And it's an interesting sort of go, because that can be the major pruning for you in your part of the world. In other words, you're pruning after flowering, because your summertime temperatures eventually scorch the blooms, stress the plants, and it's a good time to prune them. So that then when fall comes, you get a rejuvenation, if you will, because of the improving weather, cooler temperatures. Okay, step 1 applies to mature plants. And these are plants that are going to be, I'm going to say, certainly 4+ years old, 4 to 5. But these are a couple of points that the bullets I've listed here that I think you really want to take account of, because it applies whether we're talking about Memphis or we're talking about Cape Cod. The Serratas and the Macs, the stems remain vital for just 4 to 7 years. You got to think about that a little bit, because they're not long lasting. you have a plant in your garden that's 10 years old, there's not a single live piece of wood on it that was there when you planted it. You have to think about that a little bit. But it's pretty important to keep this in mind. Step one is totally and only about removing failed or failing stems. In other words, old wood that is either dead or dying. Another thing to keep in mind that the Macs are the first species to break bud in the spring, often too soon, because you can be prone to late winter frost where you are, and that spells trouble for us. So that's one of the downsides to the Macs is they're so quick to break bud. They don't need much encouragement. The stems to be removed in step one are really fairly easy to identify because you're going to see the peeling or exfoliating bark. Also, there's sort of a color determination too. You'll see the old wood looks lifeless, gray, tan, sort of obvious that, maybe it's had its time. So this is the way that is. By contrast, the vital wood is bright. Often you'll see hints of a sort of a reddish tone to the brighter browner stems or bright tan stems. And I think typically, if you think about this, 15 to 25%, again, based on what I said about stem life expectancy, 15 to 25% of the mature stems in that plant are going to probably deserve annual removal. So really, this is a story of regeneration. The removing the failed stems, the big deal is it encourages this new development. In other words, what do we want? We want new growth emanating from the basal crown of the plant. And when you see plants that are in great shape, that are about 20 years that they've been in the ground or more, I certainly have some up here that are that way. The reason they're like that is because there's been some serious regenerative pruning done to them. And that's vital to keeping the plant in good condition in terms of blooming capacity and blooming density. Okay, the best time to do step one is before, you see my underline, any initial bud growth begins. You see the two pictures here. I took these last year on April the 12th, and you can see what's happened. There's been enough growth already that if we get down inside to remove dead stems, what might we be doing? We're damaging the new growth. And you get to a point where you're going to really damage more than you're going to save. That makes sense? So there is a time dependency on this. And so I think with you can begin, you get good weather in January, the end of January, you want to go in there. If the plant is lifeless looking in total, it's a good time to work on it. And you do get some good days in the winter, certainly better than we often do. For us, it's March here, but you certainly, it's a February affair, and maybe even late January for that matter. As you can see above again, removing the old canes, this is a problem because as you get down in there with your pruners or your loppers, it's easy to make a miscut. You've cut off new growth. And the expanding buds, once they come, and that can come very quickly. I know it does for you. They are particularly vulnerable. So this is my comment. Better to waiting for next year, keeping it in mind you should do it, but don't sacrifice this year's bloom count. This is the kind of wood we're talking about. How many of you have seen this? I'm sure you have. This is the beastly, brutal stuff that's down in the basal crown of a plant that hasn't been touched in a while. And actually, these come out of some monstrous plants I have. Blue Wave, I don't know if any of you grow it, a big, monstrous lace cap, huge thing. And of course, it puts on this very stout wood. My plants are, for the most part, all irrigated, surface irrigation, and they do grow. And this particular cultivar, and I should make this comment, a lot of what you see in in stem growth is cultivar specific. You understand what I mean by that? Not every plant behaves the same way. But this is the kind of wood you're taking out. This is what you're going to remove in step one regenerative pruning. By contrast, this was the cuttings I took off of obviously finished stems that had wintered over, had not been deadheaded. You can see the bloom still in place. But this is the kind of wood you're going to leave in place at step one. because what you're wanting to do here is to make sure that all of this bud development that you can see emerging in the nodes up along the stems, we'll look at it a little bit closer here in a second, you want them all to survive. You want to give them the maximum opportunity to progress and develop. So here we are looking at this, and I've expanded these shots just a little bit because you can see the nodes in here. Oh. Anyway, you see where my arrow is here. You see the nodes, okay? Still, this is not much activity, but you see activity here, and the tip bud has survived. That's a very good thing for us. You know, we've had a very easy winter here on the Cape. Really a zone 8, something more like you would like to have. Very unusual for us to be this good. Normally, we get about 90% tip bud loss. Fortunately, most of our cultivars will bloom off the laterals. In other words, stems will develop and terminate with an inflorescence here, even further down like here and here. Thank goodness they do. This year, I might tell you that I think overall we're somewhere between 40 to 50% survival of tip buds. We haven't had that here in a very, very long time. And I've been sort of, you know, playing my cards close to the breast and watching the weather, but it looks like we may do okay. We can sometimes get fooled even as late as early April here. So we're not out of it yet, but it looks pretty good. But this is what you're going to do is leave this wood for now when you're into the period of step 1 pruning. Okay, so that's the idea. You're only concentrating on the old wood. Let's have a short session about tools. Everybody asked me about what I use or what would I recommend. And so this is 4 of the sort of commonly available, I think, better pruners that are around. In the upper left, Felco number 2 is still probably the most widely used hand pruners in the business. Baco is a French-made. Felco, as you know, is made in Switzerland. Baco is French-made. Good ergonomic feel to this. I don't think the steel is quite as good as some of the others, but nice feel in the Baco. I'm a big fan of the Japanese on the right, Okatsuni and ARS. Okatsuni, very simple, very few moving parts. Excellent steel, not fancy, just very fundamentally functional. Wonderful in that regard. ARS, and I show you these, this VS9Z are 9 inches. And for me, I'm a big hands guy, and I can use these when I'm doing step 1 pruning because I can sever some pretty big diameter stuff with them. So I can use the loppers somewhat less. I think the key point to remember about pruners, you want to pick something that you feel comfortable with in your hand. That's the number 1 thing. I'm a big fan, and these are all bypass pruners. You understand what that means is the top blade, the cutting blade, passes over the anvil of the lower. So that's really what you want because you want good, clean cuts. That's important. You don't want to crush the ends of the stems. Okay, loppers. Good pair of loppers will help you out a lot too. And I'm a big fan of the Felco Model 21s. You see them on the left laying in the grass. The beauty of them is this. They've got about a 24-inch long forged aluminum handle, so you get a lot of leverage. But look at here's the trick. Look at the cutting heads. Nearly the same size as my Okatsunis. That's important because you want to be able to reach down into the basal areas. This is true of anything you're going to prune. And be able to get in close to make good contact, make clean cuts close to your point of application. That's a very important thing. How many times we see loppers that are intended for orchard work, massive big heads on them, and certainly not very suitable, I think, for regular work by home gardeners. So I think this is a very, very important thing. And here's a little idea of how well it does. If you look in the upper left-hand side, there's a lot of small stubs in this fairly busy plant. It's had a little bit of pruning go over, but a lot of small stuff left, stubs as we call them, in the basal crown area. And then you see what it looks like below that. And on the right, you can see what we cut out. And the good loppers, these Felco 21s, really allow me to do that. I did this plant, so I mean I can attest to what's there. This is not cropped. This is really what it is. So good loppers are really worth their weight for you. I should comment about these. I'm an Okatsuni fan and the IRS, but my first Okatsunis are now 9 years old. I still use them. The lopper, my Model 21 loppers from Felco are 17 years old. I keep them in good shape. We'll talk about that in a second. But wonderful, wonderful tools. Unfortunately, a little bit on the expensive side, but if you're serious about this kind of work, it's well worth it. Okay, a little bit on sharpening. You see on the left, I call these sharpening sticks. They have varying degrees of fineness, if you will, in the grit that's embedded into the metal piece that's part of these plastic sticks, if you will. Easy to work with, about 7 inches long. You can do very nice stroking with them on pruners, on loppers. You got a coarse, a fine, and extra fine. You basically are using a fine and extra fine. I dress my pruners and loppers about every second or third week, but then again, I'm using them a lot. But I think these are the most efficient, if you will, and modest tools. About $25, I think, for the set, available on Amazon fairly easily. But I think they do a great job, and it's important to keep your tools good and sharp. You'll get great work out of it. Okay, another tool, again, depending on how much you're doing, but today the best pruning saw is battery powered. That's what you see on the right. This is a new small one, DeWalt, but all the rest of the makers of battery powered tools are making them as well. I'm a fan of DeWalt because all the batteries are interchangeable with my woodworking tools, so I stick to the DeWalts. Anyway, this is a wonderful little thing. I love it. You can get after the big wood. Remember that slide I showed you with some big brutal stuff in there? And the nice thing about this, it weighs about 3 pounds. It's easy to work with. The blade is not in it because I wanted the picture to fit. But you know what it looks like for a sawzall, if you will, reciprocating saw. But you ladies can use this one, I think, without reservation. Some of the bigger ones that we've had for a long time, I'm always a little suspect because they are pretty ferocious tools. This is much, much easier to handle. Very, very good. So there's really little reason, in my view anyway, to use a handsaw any further. Really like them. There's another piece too that's good. And this is my Americane. You've probably seen this picture before. It goes back to, I don't know, 11, 12 years ago. And we used to clean out the base of the plants, just taking a stick, if you will, and poking out the winter debris from the base of the plant so we could see what we got for us to do our work with it. Well, she got very frustrated with that sort of thing and trudged off into my workshop in the barn and came out with our shop vac that you see here. And this was in the early days. It was an early beast for sure at that point. And got everything together, and we had a little trouble with the business end. And finally, I found the Crevice Tool. Many of you might remember we used to use those cleaning out the old cast iron radiators, the heat radiators in our houses. Anyway, it works well. And it will clean out the base of that plant in a wonderful fashion. And I think it's really quite a good thing to do. A lot of litter collects at the base. The reason we vacuum, because people will always say to me, well, why don't you use a blower? Well, you can, just as you're blowing the debris somewhere else. When you vacuum it up, you contain it. And this is particularly true for, I think, a lot of you where your gardens have some level of intensity immediate to your property, immediate to your houses, your buildings. Works very well. Excuse me. And I think with the world of this. And my big thing with it is that you have taken away the winter home for a lot of the critters to give us fits. And even though hydrangeas are pretty benign from an insect point of view, they are subject to some fungicides. You are letting some of that mold live over in the base. So cleaning it out is a very important thing, I think. We've had a mild winter this year, and unless we do this, we definitely see a higher incidence of chili thrips, even mites for us to some extent on the Macrophyllas. And this greatly reduces our need for applying insecticides in the summertime. I prefer to really give low count to insecticides. I'm interested in the pollinators doing well. And currently, I do very, very little insecticide treatment unless it's something very unusual outbreak that would occur. At Heritage, where I'm curator, of hydrangeas, we've ceased using insecticides. I mean, there's a big movement on there in support of the pollinator program. But this is a big thing you can do to clean out that plant and do it well. Okay, here's one of our question slides. Any questions on what we've talked about in tools? Linda, are you monitoring?
But
Linda,
there,
are you monitoring? See if there's any questions?
huh?
Are you monitoring to see if there's been any questions about pruning tools?
Wait a sec. Are you there now? I'm sorry, I had trouble unmuting my microphone.
Oh, okay.
We did have one question, but not about the tools. And what it was about is this, and I think they were a little bit confused about in January, you said to prune before the new growth appears. And then, so someone said, so if all the wood is lifeless and there are no signs of new growth, how long do you wait before singing the swan song and finding a new hydrangea? But
Well,
I think.
Well, listen up. That's a good question. But please note why we have 3 steps to Macrophylla and Serrata pruning. When we get to step 2, we're going to be doing just that. The point is that you see many old busy plants that got an immense amount of dead or failing wood. You got to get it out of there because you want to encourage new growth. I think if you follow along with what I'm doing, I'm sort of going to answer that, but we'll come back to it if there's anyone's unsure of what we're doing. Remember, these are specific events. You're only doing one thing at a time. Got that?
Right.
And that's what step 1 is all about. Right. You're simply cleaning out the extraneous, extra ferocious wood that many plants have. I've seen your plants down here. I know you have it. We all do. We all do.
Yes.
But that's what you do in a singular fashion at that time. Right. And even though everything looks lifeless, you very quickly, I will train and you'll be able to tell which is the vital wood from that which is needed to be removed. Believe me, you will. Anyway, should we move along then?
Yes, that was it.
Okay, very good. Okay, let's cover the serratas just quickly. We know them well. You do grow them there. I've seen them in your gardens. In fact, you had that small nursery there nearby that specialized in serratas and did a good job of it at that point. I don't know. Are they still in business? I don't know.
Yeah, Gardens Oy Bay.
Yeah, Gardens Oy Bay. And they had some actually very good serratas. Serratas are going to make a big comeback, and I'll get to that a little bit later. Probably the last comment here, but it's pretty good. And we know them well. I like them for this reason. They are tough. They may look delicate, but they are much more cold hardy than the Macrophyllas, much more so. For us up here, that's a bigger influence than it is for you. They look dainty. They're mostly lace caps, as you know, but they are rugged little beasts. And I shouldn't say little, some of them are pretty good size. They do hybridize very well with Macrophyllas, and a lot of times in the past, it was H. macrophylla X H. serrata. In other words, the serrata was introduced to the Macrophylla to try to improve its cold hardiness properties. Well, the move these days is you're taking H. serrata, all right, and hybridizing it with H. macrophylla. You may say, well, how is that? Well, I think all of you know enough in genetics. There is something very distinctive about that change. So what they're doing is taking the basic winter hardiness of the serrata and improving its blossom, its bloom form via Macrophylla. Proven Winners has probably got a little leap on that over some of the others. And some of their new stuff is really excellent. I've had a chance, obviously, to review it and trial some of the plants. They're very, very good. Anyway, in step 1 pruning in the serratas is very much like the Macrophyllas. We're going to do the same thing. Thing to remember about many of the cultivars, the serratas, is they're very densely wooded. I think if you think about it here while you're watching me, that'll come to mind. And I think you've got to thin some of that wood out, the dead wood. It's important to do it because you get so much congestion at the basal crown of the plant, and you want to have, again, new growth. The species blooms almost exclusively on old wood, but they're very good in terms of cold hardiness. Excuse me, I got a little. Pardon me, I'm going to have a sip. It's only water too, so. Okay. Here's a before and after. You can see how busy the plant is at the right, on the left, sorry, and in the before view. Look at all the wood that's generated. That's generated in a single season. And then you see on the right-hand side, after we've thinned it out, makes quite a difference, doesn't it? And that's the kind of work that we do very early, very early. I'm encouraging you to do in January. We do it in February, early March. Here's a Serrata Hokkaido, which we like. It's got a lovely lace cap flower. Strong plant, very floriferous. But it produces a hellacious amount of wood. Look at it all on the left-hand side. And some of it pretty big. So we definitely get in at this and clean it out. Now, we do a couple of things. One, we take out aging canes that need to come away, but we also get after all this stuff that's down low, because we have endless troubles with anything that's what we call low liars. They root easily, and you end up, the whole basal area of the plant ends up with a lot of volunteers. And it's the last thing you really want if you're going to keep plant form. Now, you might be happy with it because they've self-rooted. You can dig them up and make an exchange with your neighbor, and that's fine too. But in case of what we do, you can see it on the right that we've taken it out. I'm going to show you a little more detail here. Here's a little closer in on the left-hand side. You can see how open we have made the basal crown of the plant. And then a really close up, a little bit from above and enlarged a little more on the right-hand side. So you can see what we've done. We've taken out a lot of stems. And all that growth that you saw 2 slides ago will come back in a single season. Powerful growers, powerful growers. But we get great flowering. At Heritage, I think our Serrata bed now contains about 20 different cultivars. And you know, we'll have thousands of blossoms come early July. It's really very, very floriferous. We almost take it for granted because they never fail. So it's a great, great species in that regard. Okay, we'll move on to the Macs. We all love them. You love them. I love them. The world loves them. You know, we're up to about 22 to 24 million plants produced annually in the US of hydrangeas. Second only to roses as a woody ornamental. And of that 22 plus million, about 80% of them are still a single species in its Macrophylla. So the great color opportunities, the great bloom forms, particularly the marvelous mopheads, are a powerful, powerful draw, no question about it. Superb colors, just magnificent. We do very well with them where we are because we have the moderate temperatures that they like. You know, we're coastal, maritime, and the origin of Macrophyllas is maritime Japan and the neighboring islands. So we duplicate that. We have a little more winter cold than they do, but we're very similar otherwise. Even in our summer, our days don't get terribly hot. Oh, we'll get to 80 once in a while. Nighttime temperatures dropping to the mid 60s. But Macrophyllas love that. They don't like it hot, they don't like it cold, and they don't like sudden change. So we have an ideal condition for them. My hat is always off to you because you go to great lengths and do, I think, a very creditable job giving the adversity of your weather. So we all love them. They're great. And I think we also know the last comment down here, we can do some interesting manipulations with colors by virtue of the amount of soil of aluminum in the soil, and then lowering the pH so that it's available to the plant. A couple of more comments. The downside to the Macs are, of course, they're the least cold hardy. I have been to the parts of the world where they grow in profusion, New Zealand and the Azores. The Azores are a lot closer to New Zealand, and maybe if we ever get back to normal again, you might put that in your bucket list. It's unbelievable, the Macrophyllas that grow in the Azores. It is the only species that will grow. They don't have enough winter chill hours for any of the other species. I know that may sound crazy to you, but it's the truth. Flowering is so dense and extraordinary in both New Zealand and the Azores that sometimes you cannot see the foliage. We do pretty well up here, but I think at best we might get a B- by comparison to those places. I already mentioned to you about its sensitivity, and winter wind is also a beast. And in fact, I think it's the equal enemy of cold temperatures in the sense that the winter winds are often very dry. In other words, they lack moisture, even where you are. You get that continental weather effect. And what happens is that then the buds, the desiccating, drying effect of those winter winds, the buds perish. So I think it's an equal enemy in the winter as same as cold is. Bud hardiness is the beast and is not the same as plant hardiness. The plant may be hardy to zone 5 as the tag says, but you will never see a flower. I think, to be perfectly honest with you, straight macrophyllas, bud, flowering, hardiness, probably does not exist much below zone 7, maybe some in zone 6. Really, the industry does us a big disservice by saying saying hardiness is zone 5. Yes, the plant will live, but you will not have any flowers in those cold temperatures. And my last comment, Macs don't like sudden change at all, and they don't like heat, and you got plenty of that. The foliage wilts easily and the blooms scorch, as you know. So for you, growing them in substantial shade is imperative. One of the things I do like about them, this is the famous brown stick season. For you, it's December through maybe early March, because you break out pretty early. For us, it's December through early April. And you can see the max. And this is the brown stick season. You see what everything looks like. This is when we begin our pruning. But look what our reward is when we get to July. This is Cape Cod in July. This is the same location. This is at the farm, my farm. Pretty dramatic, and that's why we love these plants. You can't beat that, can you? Really extraordinary. Really extraordinary. Okay, let's look at our step 1 pruning then for the max. Now, here's an old beastly plant. Many of you have seen things like this. Look at all the debris at the base. Look at how much of the aging canes remain that should have been removed. This plant hadn't been addressed for a while. And exfoliating bark, easy to pick out. Easy to pick out. Okay. Again, Mary Kay in the shop back in action, doing a good job cleaning it out. You see in the upper right, the before, here we've cleaned it out, and look there. Nice new growth emanating from the basal crown of that plant. That's what we want. That's the whole key. Regeneration. That's where it comes from. You're going to get a lot of wood. There's the old trusty Model 21 Loppers, but look at that pile of wood. So you can't be shy about this. Serious clean out is serious. Now, I want to say this to you, not to scare you off. First time you do this to a plant that hasn't been touched for a while, you're going to put in some time. Might take you an hour to do a plant reasonably well, maybe a little hour and a quarter. Subsequent years, it becomes easier. But once you get this out of there, new growth comes, you're going to have a much improved looking plant, and you will have better flowering. Here's a view down in on the plant that we cleaned out. You can see the new growth is obviously, right, you see it there in the center crown. That's what we want. And for us up here, and the same for you, the days are getting longer, even in February when you're working on it. And that's what it is. The sunshine gets down into the base and new growth emanates from it. That's key. A couple more shots of showing you the before and afters. You can see some very busy plants. Look at the upper left. And these are plants that hadn't been well attended for some time. We took over this property in terms of pruning. And you can see afterward in the lower left, but then I've done a close-up. So you again can see what was obvious in the other slides too. We take a lot of wood out of here. And try to get rid of all of the unnecessary stuff that's either too low, distorted as well can come out. So it's a great time to do it, and there's nothing in your way. That's the beauty of it. Here's another one, and I stuck this in because this was also this is a commercial site for us. Look at the before. We took this property over, and no one had put a pruner to the place for probably 6 or 7 years. Look at that stuff. We did a tremendous amount of work. And look at the major surgery. That was 2 plants, that big, huge pile you see there. And you can see what it looked like on the right. Very interestingly, I want you to peek at this. This is the same picture you're going to see. But look here. What happens is that when you let all that low-lying growth that's coming out of that primary basal crown, you let it lay along the ground and it roots. And what happens? You get a volunteer. Another plant grows. If you don't collect that, you end up with a plant that has a huge base, often to the point where the central core declines, and you're just growing the outer rim of all of this. Very difficult then to get the plant back. What we often will do with this is we sever this, right, where you see that root section going across, and then lift out the section on the right and replant it somewhere else where we want to fill in. So you can use all of this. I'm just pointing this out. Is this what happens if you let all the extraneous growth lay on the ground and not be attended to? This is what you get. Okay, there probably is a limit to what you do. In other words, is it a recoverable plant? And here I've showed you 2 pictures. The one on the right is definitely at the limit. The one on the left is way over the limit. Almost impossible to clean it out. And I'm one of these kind of guys that try to salvage all kinds of plants, but sometimes you get to the point where it just doesn't make sense. In other words, you're better off to dig it out and replace it. Now, if it's something special to you, if it's a pass-along plant, a hand-me-down, something that had some sentimental value, came from your grandmother or your aunt, well, that's a different story. Then you might save a section, and we've done that, where we've divided the plant up, split it up, and saved the best looking piece or pieces out of it. The other thing you can do is always propagate from cuttings, because as you know, asexual propagation from cuttings is true to the original plant. So here's a beast that's 20 years plus old on a property that we've looked at, and after much going about, we actually did take cuttings of this plant, but we replaced it. The owners realized that this was a dead-end street. Imagine trying to clean that up. Not very easy to do. So this one is definitely not recoverable. So as I mentioned in here, the propagation works really quite well. We've done a lot of that, actually. Many times people will have a plant they've gotten from somebody and said, oh, would you start some plants for us? Because we'd like to give them to the rest of our family. I'd say every summer we get 1 or 2 requests like that. And occasionally, you know, when we dug them up, we have gotten some good sections out of the plants, replanted them. 3 or 4 years later, you got a great looking plant, and, you know, it's well worth doing. So you kind of got to look at it that way. But that's our address to big plants, because I often get asked that. Okay, lastly, just again, regenerative pruning, late winter, early spring, before bud break. It's the time to perform the old wood surgery, the removal of same. And this is particular to the Macrophyllas and the Serratas. And again, remember, if you do a good job of pruning, you will see better flowering. Okay, we've sort of answered that one question. And any other questions on step 1 pruning?
No, we don't have any other questions. The one thing I would like to say, and I think this is what some people forget, is what you pointed out. When you plant a new hydrangea macrophylla, you don't really have to do this massive pruning of removal of old, aged, peeling wood, because it's not old enough yet. And you need to wait till your shrub needs to be at least 4, if not 5 years old, before you will see that it is starting to be non-productive. So the first few years you have a macrophylla in the ground, it is not a concern for you to do this type of regenerative pruning. It is basically when you have an aged plant that is having peeling, aged wood that's not producing new blooms, and it's congesting your shrub. That's kind of a synopsis, isn't it, of what you were saying?
You've said that perfectly. That's exactly what it is.
All right.
But I know some of you got old plants, and this is a way to revitalize them.
Yes.
Bring them back into being in good condition again, improve their flowering, they'll look better. The plants will love you for having done it.
I
new
bought
plantings, you don't have to do that.
right. Well, I in my situation, which others may have, I purchased a home 3 or 4 years ago now, and there was one hydrangea in my garden, and I have hesitated being this aggressive with it. But next year I'm going to be more aggressive because it really, you're just so hesitant, I think, as someone who's trying to grow a beautiful hydrangea with flowers. It's very hard for me to cut any of the wood. But I'm telling you, after seeing this, I see my plant today that's been here many years before I bought the home, and it
Sure.
is desperately needing this kind of work. So I think this gives me courage, and I hope it gives others courage to really get in there and clean up some of that older wood. Thank
Well,
you.
it's a good plan. I think, and here's the thing. How many plants do you have on your properties? I'll share this with all of you. How many do you have to do? Maybe you've got 3 or 4, maybe you got 6. I doubt many of you have too many more than that. At Heritage, we got a lot of big plants, but of course we got a crew. So, we can get it done. But you can only do what you can do. And if you don't do this and your plant's moving along in good shape, that's fine. I think you will get better results if you do it. That's where it stands. Okay,
Yeah.
let's move on then. All right.
Okay.
Okay, now we're going to go to step 2. And this is what most of you do. And this kind of fits in that sort of question you asked at first, Linda. And step 2, and that's the kind of stuff now, this is what you got going on at your place at the moment.
Oh,
You
definitely.
have leafed out well. Your plants probably look like these, do they not?
Yes, they definitely do.
Yeah,
Definitely.
but you're going to have stems, you see that winter kill. See it at the
Yes.
top of some of these stems? Maybe not a lot, but you're going to have it. There's always going to be a certain amount of winter kill. In the good years, you'll have very little, but when you have some frosty winters, and you can have plenty of them, you're going to see more of this. In other words, you're going to see upper stem sections. The uppermost sections of these stems that have wintered over are not going to make it. You wait as long as you can. We're always hopeful, okay? But then you're going to cut it off because that's the last thing you want to see. Dead is dead. It's the last thing you want to see to disappoint your overall view of your plants is to leave this stuff. I see it, stuff that's stuff that's out in the roadways or is in the exterior of the bank's parking area, where they just don't get to the stuff. Old Nico Blues up here, and you got them the same. They leave it go, and it looks like the dickens. And even though the new growth will cover up a lot of it, it still looks pretty bad. So you see the difference in my time go. We're at this. When we get to next month, we're definitely 4 weeks to 5 weeks behind you. So this is real. So this is what you're doing. You're simply cutting it off, and this accounts for the majority of pruning that is done. Is what I'm showing you here. This is the majority of pruning that's done to plants, and in many instances, it's the only pruning they receive. Okay, so let's look a little more detail here, and you can see on the right, in the upper right, also if we get stems that are poorly fleshed out, in other words, where we don't have uniform emergence of new wood. I can peek right in here and you'll see what I'm saying. There is some growth here to come from this node, but see, and then we have this long bare stem here. The nodes that are here perished, they didn't make it. And then we have a little growth here at the top. A lot better down at the bottom. So we might say, look, that's not really doing very well. So we've cut it off because it's negative in terms of visibility is the reason we're taking it out. We know that we have a better chance of blossom developing off of this piece that's come down right here from below the node just below. Everybody follow that? I hope you do. Okay, we'll see more of that. Okay, some tighter cuts here. You can see what I'm showing you here too. Many times you'll see the stem, you'll see new growth. This will be near the tip or at the very tip, the topmost nodes. You'll see the new development, but the center will be puny or fail. We typically will cut that out because the stronger stems that have the better chance of producing flowers are these right here. Those on either side of that node. either side of this tip. So we cut that completely out. And on the right-hand side, you can see it cleanly where we just made the cut. This is pretty important, and you won't have a lot of this, but in any given bush, you'll have probably, if it's any size, you'll probably have 3 to 6 situations perhaps that are like this. Now you say, well, you can leave that. Maybe something good's going to happen. I can assure you that it won't. So you're really removing failing or poorly formed wood because you've done a good job. The rest of the plant is very vital, tremendously powerful new growth. And that's what we're after. Okay, and if you do your step 1 and step 2 well, this is your reward. This is a property down on the east end of the Cape that we look after. These plants were not well attended before we took over about 4 years ago. And this was the first year after we went through our rigorous pruning that we have already shared with you. And this is what we had in July, and June. So that's why I used both months here. So pretty good reward. These are Nico Blue, nothing spectacular, but certainly plenty of them. Good old Nico, much maligned, but it is a very floriferous plant. You can see good bloom density, quite hardy. You do get some later blooms. I wouldn't call it a truly remontant plant, but you see stuff through the summer developing as you see here. And maybe we get a little spurt sometime in September, but really good. So then just as a quick review, remember this too about the Macs. They mainly flower. Now, okay, we can have the remontancies in a lot of the new varieties, but they mainly flower on buds that were produced at the end of the previous growing season. In other words, the buds are formed in the autumn, the previous autumn. They must survive the winter to then become next summer's flowers. So in your case, bud swell can be, something that happens for you even in many years, late February, certainly early March. This is the dates following us. And then the blossoms will develop in your case, late May and particularly June, for us, July. So the step 1, again, is something you're going to do before bud break. You do it late winter for sure, maybe early spring here, but for you, definitely late winter. And then step 2, something you're doing now. This is very important because now you want to get rid of that remaining winter killed buds and stems so that you're cut back to the first pair of good live buds. And now your development will come off of that and you should do fairly well because now you've got a good development time. You probably have blossoms already forming, I would think, on some of your plants. That would be my
Yeah.
belief.
Oh, mine is very, I was shocked after we had a terribly long, very cold spell in February. The Hydrangea Macrophylla in the ground, the old one I have, is loaded with buds.
Good.
It is loaded. And I hope everyone has a good bloom year this year.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what you deserve. You deserve it. You deserve it.
Every 3 years we get a good.
Well, because we've had some tough ones. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
We're in line here for being very, very good, best in a long time. So I'm hoping it holds. That's for sure. Okay, we'll keep moving along. Now there is a step. Oh, yeah, I got ahead of myself. There is a step 3. This is pinch pruning, and this is very important for you because you actually do it. I've just named it something differently for what we do up here. How many of you recognize a picture like this? New growth. You see the new growth? New growth, this is new stems of the season. Very vigorous. This is an irrigated plant, gets a lot of powerful new growth. And you see the new stems have grown up past the flower line. In other words, they're actually obscuring the blossoms that have formed on this plant from last year's growth. Hope everybody can see that. See what I'm pointing to here? All this growth has come up and is going beyond the existing flower line. And what I'm showing you with the little red checks is that we pinch it off. We cut it off. Now, it re-exposes the flowers. You're not doing any harm. In fact, you're doing the bush itself a positive move because you're taking away this wood, and you will see that for every single stem you cut, 2 new duplicate stems form. They come out of the axils between the petioles and the stems on each of those nodes going up or down that plant. So this is a pretty key thing to see. Look at it here. You can take spent blooms off as well. In other words, you get a lot of this. Let's say that you've had a scorching July and your stuff is scorching end of June for you, and your blooms have burned up. Well, you can take off the spent blooms just in the manner I showed in the previous slide. And what you're going to be doing is you're encouraging new blooms to form. See them here? And I think that's a good thing. So this is not a bad move at all. Not a bad move at all. And this is really a good time for you overall to do this kind of pruning. In other words, pinch pruning is important for you because doing it at that point, you have, and let's look here. Let's look at this. This will help you, I think, a lot. Here we pinched off. See that? We had a long stem here. We pinched it off, and look what we got for it. 2 new stems developed. Same as I'm showing you over here on the right hand side. And you see one up here. Same thing. We cut it. New growth is formed. So you have doubled the potential, even for at least the following years growing. When you buy a plant at the nursery, what do you think the Nurseries does to develop a nice bushy plant for you to buy? They pinch it. They pinch it 2 or 3 times a year in its developmental form. And why? To make a nice bushy plant that then in the year of sale, you've got a lot of flowers because of what you've done. Hope everybody understands that. You can do this yourself. This is what it's all about. And the way you are doing it when you sort of do your pruning, many of you, I think, do prune. In fact, you know, there is a statement that's not incorrect. For you in the South, your major pruning can be after the plants flower, which for you is going to be July. It's beastly hot. Your cooler weather is going to come at the end of August and into September, maybe a little rain too. And all that vibrant new growth improves the overall character of the plant. So it's a big, big plus. Lastly, in this comment, you see what you're doing also stimulates late season reblooming on those cultivars that have the capability to rebloom or being remontant. So there's some good stuff in that. I'm going to show you a little bit more of that. Bloomstruck, this was Dr. Durr sent me a couple of plants the first year that this plant was out for trial. So it's been a few years now. They were bloomstruck, and so I grew them in pots, and I wanted to do that for a reason, so I could study them very close. And I pinched them all because I wanted to see whether, in fact, the claim of it being remontant, repeat blooming, was true. And you can see in this slide the new growth by virtue of color. Looks very good. And you see the 2 flowers that are retained. Okay. Now I took this photo a couple of months later. We had 17 new blossoms develop on that plant. All those new stems that you saw here, right? These terminated in an inflorescence here. How about that? So it was real. One of the other interesting things we didn't understand then was, you see the spotting that occurred here. This was in a sunny location. One of the things we found with bloomstruck was didn't do so well in direct sun, even for us. And when we relocated them to places that had half a day of shade, we did much better and it stayed cleaner. Good plant, very powerful in the sense that it has wonderful winter bud hardiness. Very, very good. But that shows you what you can do, and what that kind of pinching does is that it stimulates this late development. Okay, so pinching is the removal of the extra errant growth. First of all, we saw the new wood that grew up past the flower line. So you're re-exposing the blooms, creates again, I think, better plant form. I'm sort of keen on that. I want to see a lot of flowers, but I want to see a plant that looks good too. And I think pinching the spent blossoms has some effect, positive, on checking growth. And the big thing is it promotes that new branching and subsequently certainly better bud development for the following year. July is a good month. The reason is that now you got plenty of growing time after that for wood development. Very, very good. And for you, as I've said before, step 3 in July can and should be a regular pruning event. This is central to you because you can take off all the blooms that have been scorched, encourage new growth when you get into that late August and particularly September. You'll really see a difference. You really will. And it's practiced throughout the South, but I think for you, it definitely works well. Okay, questions about 2 and 3?
Well, let me tell you what I had. Somebody asked here that when you're doing the pinch pruning and you're cutting back the stems, can you use those stems then to propagate for new plants?
Great question. Absolutely. It's some of the best stuff you got going. Let me tell you, if you do the pinching in July and the good vibrant stem wood that you get then, in other words, it's what we call firm wood. It roots like a demon. We routinely do a big batch of propagation from those cuttings.
Okay.
Generally, yeah, and my Mary Kay is here coaching me as she often does so well. But she's right. We generally will use those, the new growth stems that don't have a flower. Remember I showed you them very early on?
Right.
And so we use the flowers. I have used stems though that have flowers, cut them back and just did stem cuttings. You understand? No tips at all.
Yeah.
The tips root a little bit quicker, but the stems root pretty well too. So don't have much trouble, but it's wonderful wood. And Macrophyllas, you know, and the Serratas, but Max in particular is so easy to root. You can do it. You can make more plants for yourself very, very easily. It's a good time to do it.
Okay. And when
Especially
you
where
do when you do the pinch pruning after the bloom, you know, sometimes it's hard for me. It's just hard for me to cut my blooms off because I kind of like that antiquing. But I think on the remontant ones, I need to really be disciplined and do that, because if I can get a real second flush in September, that would be great. I don't normally see that on my remontant because I don't cut the blooms like this. So
Yeah.
deadheading or pinch pruning as you're cutting it back further than just deadheading will generate more blooms in the remontants. Should I feed? You know, in Memphis, I don't know how, I usually consider not feeding my hydrangeas past the end of July. Does
Well,
that
that's
sound
good.
right?
Yeah, fertilizing. That's a good question. You know, the key months for you, growth wise, are going to be April, May, June, July, August, September, even October, because you have a long growing season. No question of that. You could treat things a little differently. My recommendation always is to go with one of the CRF's controlled release fertilizers.
Okay.
You use something that's got a 5 to 6 month duration, you're going to be well placed, because you only then need to fertilize once, and you would do it sometimes in March after you've done that initial pruning. Or you can do it in April. I mean, either month is fine, but that's all you need to do. You're quite right about drawing a line at which you don't fertilize in the autumn. You don't want to do that, because what invariably happens is that new wood development that comes late is the first that perishes when we have sudden cold in the winter, because it's just not strong enough. So you're better to let the plant, remember the old term, harden off. In other words, there's no reason to give it late fertilizing. You'll see where some recommend doing it. I think it's a huge mistake. We don't fertilize of any kind, even in small new plants that we put in the ground, after August 31st. So that's our line in the sand.
But okay. But to be
And
safe,
the other thing, remember about hydrangeas too, they're not big fertilizer hounds.
right?
You don't need to give them a lot. You know, for us, even a good sized plant, and you know the size of ours are pretty robust. The maximum any plant would receive would be 4 ounces. That's all, once a year. So we get plenty of good growth out of that. My belief is that you do your work with good soil composition to begin with. That's your best fertilizer, and the plant will grow well after that. And then do everything you do after that. Do it from the top down, just like Mother Nature does. So, you know, mulching. We're quite successful with mixing mulch and manure or immediately around the plant. I've had good luck with that, particularly on new plantings. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So, for us too, irrigation is key. We may have better temperatures than you do, but we can be very, very dry. A lot of times here on the Cape, thunderstorms don't come to us. They get dissipated over the ocean before they reach us. So irrigation is central for us. And last year we had a very dry summer, and plants that did not get well watered really took a beating. So, listen, in gardening, The devil is always somewhere lurking around the corner.
Is
You get it one way or the other.
That's true. A lady, Virginia, just came on and asked, should fertilizing, the method that you recommended, be adjusted if you grow your hydrangeas in containers, or the same?
That's a good question. You know, I'm glad to hear that you're growing in the containers, because the nice thing with container growing, we're doing a lot of it here for a slightly different reason than you would. But the beauty of containers is that you can exactly stylize the way they grow because you control all of it. Things you got to remember about containers are they need more watering because they're going to dry out more quickly. Fertilizing, I don't think they need any more. What you might do because of your long growing season is fertilize, let's say, 1st of April, and then again, a lesser amount, if you will, a lesser amount, anticipating the little burst again in the early autumn, so in August. Again, I would probably do half. In other words, if I took 4 ounces, I might do 2.5 ounces or so early, and then the balance another 1.5 ounces or whatever, as I say, in the second go. Only because you got a long season and you want to go with it. There's no question in a container that requires a little more attention. The big advantage is that you control it. And you can move the plant so that the sun shade accommodation is better. You can keep plants sort of in the background, and when you got somebody coming over to visit with you and you want to show off, you drag it out and say, my, are you a lucky good gardener? Anyway, that kind of thing. We do it here because we do using bags these days in deco pots or plastic pots in deco pots, because then it's an easy way for us to lift them out when we come to our winter and put them in an unheated place but out of direct contact with the weather. So we've had very good success, and we do quite a bit of that. You are slightly different in your regard, but you still control it because you manage the plant's environment totally, and that's a great thing. One thing I should mention too, since we're talking about that, when you're doing container planting, and since you've created the soil mixture, remember, if you use normal potting mixes, they contain no aluminum. So you're going to have, if you want blues or the purples you see here in the backdrop in this slide, you're going to have to add aluminum. So aluminum sulfate is going to be part of your practice. And do it as a drench. And apply, 1 tablespoon per gallon in your watering can, but do it to a plant that has been well watered in advance. In other words, simply put, if you got a 2.5 gallon watering can, you use that 2.5 gallon to water 2 container plants before you apply any of your aluminum sulfate mixture. In other words, avoid the chances of getting over acidification. I'd be very careful about that, but you can get good results. So you understand, what gives us blue in Macrophyllas and Serratus is aluminum in the soil. Everybody says, oh, it's pH. No, it's not. pH is the only role in pH is that it lowers the soil acidity to the point that the metals, aluminum, iron's the same, can be assimilated by the plant. That's how the mechanism works. And that's what you got to do. A lot of people say to me, oh, I'm just going to put sulfur on. Well, that's fine, but if there's no aluminum in the soil, it will never be blue. You'll acidify the plant to the point of killing it, that it will never be blue. So you got to remember that is aluminum is the first factor. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Anything else? Are you?
Okay. I guess I got a couple more things to share with you.
Okay, good.
This is, at Heritage where I'm at. I'm curator there of hydrangeas, and we're doing fairly well with that. And I just show you our lineup. We have what we call the Hydrangea Success Series. You can sign up for these things. In fact, we've had people as far away as you are. In fact, last week I did one, and I had somebody from Washington State. Word of mouth is around, and that's how they do it. So I guess and they got up early in the morning too, because we did it at, I don't know, 10:30 or something. So it was 7:30 their time. Anyway, the first two of these are gone at the end of this month, which is timely for us. I'm doing step 2, step 3 pinch pruning, and in the case for them, we're doing a little bit more out in the garden, although we have to video it and take stills. So And then the May 14th, we have a very biggie on planting and replanting in ground and in containers. I spend a good bit of it. This is our biggest program. Spend a good bit of time on both things to do a good job of getting a plant in the ground well, and also doing so in containers. And spend a lot of time on good mixes and what we're doing there. Every other year we do one on propagation. We get a lot of people interested in that. Everybody wants to make more plants, and it's a great way to go. It's easy to do. And I share these things with you because maybe some of these might be of interest to you. You have to sign up for them, but they're pretty good. We have a biggie with Hydrangea University, and one of the things that goes on on the Cape is that we have a 10-day long annual Hydrangea Festival. It's quite an event, and a lot of private gardens are open for touring during that time. It's really spectacular. And we hold Hydrangea University in conjunction with the Cape Cod Hydrangea Society for the opening day, which is July the 9th. Program runs until the 18th, but we have this great effort in the morning, 3 speakers. And this year, it's a lady who's very good in garden design. I've heard her before, and she's going to do a great job of it, I think. And then the other 2 speakers, I think we're going to have a great go in this way is Tim Wood from Spring Meadow Proven Winners and myself. And we're going to go through this whole exercise. I'm going to present what we've done in our test garden, where we have looked at so many of the new hydrangeas over the since 2016, and give a report on where we've come to and what we see in the hybridizing that's going on. And then Tim is going to share what they are doing with the newest mechanisms in hybridizing. So for somebody that's really keen on hydrangeas, this is, I think, going to be a very, very good program. I'm particularly pleased that it's going to work out this way. And the last thing I do, I don't know whether this is relevant to you folks a lot, but winterizing, winter protection up here, we do it. I'm a strong recommender of first-year plants in the ground for our weather, that we do protect them in various ways. And we seem to have some very good results. I uncovered several of mine this week ago, and I was really delighted how good they look. Very, very good. I did a lot of new plantings last year in my own garden, which is a pretty extensive collection. Anyway, just wanted to share this stuff with you. And again, go to the Heritage site from time to time, because all of our work in the test garden is posted, so you can go and have a look, see for yourself.
Right.
No need to sign on, no need to have a formal sign on. You don't have to be a member.
Right.
Access is open to you too. So, and we got some great gardens there. If you ever get up our way, it's worth a stop.
They are stunning. Several of us have been up there, and I would love to go again this July. I don't know if I'll make it, but I'm thinking about giving it a shot.
Good.
I have a couple questions came in, but they were not about Hydrangea Macrophyllas. Do you mind?
Not at all. Here. Yeah, go ahead. I'll just put this slide up, but yeah, you can ask me anything.
Well, someone asked here in the Memphis area, they had not cut back their paniculatas, nor have they cut back their arborescens. They can still do that now, can they not? Because they bloom.
Yeah. The only thing I'm going to say to you now is what you got to look at, though, is this. Once new growth starts, in other words, once the buds swell and they start to move on, you may end up shortchanging yourself a little bit, but I don't think it's serious at this point. Here we are, the middle of April. I think you're okay.
Okay.
One of the things that I'm doing, I'll just share this with you, on paniculatas in particular. Because of our coolish weather that we get, particularly in the autumn, paniculatas for us grow like demons. I mean, limelights will put on 5 feet a year for us. I mean, they're just massive brutes. Phantom, I don't know if any of you have ever grown phantom. We got a couple of them. I swear it's 6 feet. The dang things by the end of the year are 12, 13 feet tall. We have a huge job of pruning.
Yes.
They just grow like the dickens. Anyway, I am in a selected number of plants. I started this a couple of years ago, but I'm doing, if you will, sort of a pinch pruning, and I'm working out dates. In other words, I'm doing different times for different plants to study the effect. But my idea is to get more, if you will, buds developing, because I have increased, if you will, the stem count by virtue of my pinching. You understand that? Same thing happens. Interestingly, with paniculatas, I think many of you looked at this. When you look at the node patterns going up the stems, the vibrant plants, there's 3 nodes that come off, excuse me, 3 branches come off, 3 stems develop at each node. I think some of you have seen that.
Yes.
It's called whirling, Whorling. So when you get the word search, you'll be a winner with that one. Any case, that's the way the plants form up. It's really great. You can really develop a tremendous plant in that way and keep it under control. Thing you got to remember about both of the species that you mentioned, paniculata and arborescens, you have to prune them. They'll get away on you. They'll become so big and overbearing and they'll flop like demons. You think Annabelle disappoints in the thunderstorm. If you don't prune it, it'll lay on the ground. So you have to really pay attention to it. It's not too late, I don't think, for where you are. We're pruning. We had some, not real warm, but good sunny days here, a string of them, in the last week to 10 days. And so things have moved along fairly good. Like I said to you early on, the Macs are well out, not like you are, but I mean, buds swell. Now we have the beginning of the unfurling of the tip buds in the upper nodes, which is good. But I was surprised the other day how quickly some of the arborescens, particularly those in the sun for us, boy, they just have moved along very, very powerfully.
Yeah.
So, but I wouldn't discourage you from doing it. I think you still have time where you are.
Okay. We had a lady ask here, just what you touched on the arborescence with the flopping. And she wondered what she's doing wrong. And I just, maybe she's cutting them back too hard. Or what do you think?
There's always that. You know, when I lived in Atlanta, I can always remember Penny McHenry. She had a side hill of her back garden was all Annabelles. And I was always amazed. She would cut them down. All they were was 6-inch stubs sticking out of the ground. And you know, I thought, oh my goodness, this is gonna be terrible. And you know, they were pretty good. She had a fair bit of shade, however. And what I think happened was that the hard rains were somewhat dissipated by the pine trees.
I see.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that the beastly intensity of the rain did not get to the plants. And the other thing is, she never would admit this, but I think she went out and did a little intermediary pinching to keep them in good form. Anyway, my recommendations to you is that in future you got to keep a framework for an arborescence. You understand what I mean by that?
Yes, you need older wood.
We'll generally not go less than about 2 nodes on a big strong stem. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
And many we keep 3. Sometime on early developing plants, we might leave the odd 4 to get balance to the plant framework. But I think framework is important because that provides the essential strength. One of the other things to keep in mind is this, and it was, I think, the first time I ever came to Memphis. I was mightily impressed. We went to one garden, and I think it was Linda Lanier that took me. Anyway, the lady had a lovely property, and she was on a golf course, if I recall.
Yes, I know who you're talking about. She had that side garden edged in boxwood with the huge
massive planting of Annabelle. Well, anyway, I got in and looked it over. Well, the gardeners were smart. They had planted the plants about 2 feet apart. That was very close spacing.
Right.
And the plants supported each other.
Right.
So that's something you can keep in mind. I have subsequently, I must tell you, commercially, I've done it in several places and it works.
Yes.
In other words, if you get good plant density in there, the plants tend to support themselves, create a good network, and look a hell of a lot better than freestanding. They really do.
Right. I think on the arborescens, the first year, if you put it in the ground and it's only a gallon, you cut it deep the first year to get more shoots coming up. But after that, like you said, you want to develop a stronger base, and you cut it like maybe 12 to 18 inches.
Yeah, I think
leave 3 or 4 nodes. Don't cut it down so hard so that it's like a crepe myrtle. When people really butcher a crepe myrtle, how the blossoms come out and are so heavy. Is it?
I think what you said is about right. I tend with arborescens though to give them a chance even when we put them in the ground. In fact, I've got a whole bunch of 1 gallon stuff that I've been fooling with and going in the ground this year. And I give them a moderate pruning the first year and see how they do. I find that they're a plant that I even give a little extra fertilizer to the first year or two.
Okay.
I think they're a plant that if you give them a good kick in the butt, they come along much better. And that's just the nature of the beast. I don't think they're particularly good plants in containers. I wouldn't grow them in a container.
Okay.
But in the ground, to give them a little help, they're very good.
Okay. We had now on we have one last question on the Macrophyllas. We had talked about cutting them or pinch pruning them pretty hard in July so that they would possibly rebloom for us here in September. The question is this, is because the heat is so hot in Memphis, will that suppress the chance of them producing more buds into September?
Oh, I think it does. The point though is this: you season to season things change. You really have 2 growing seasons for Macrophyllas, because you have your wonderful spring, and then, like you say, things get burned up, and then they come again in the fall, in the autumn. I don't think it matters about the heat. The coolness will come, and the plant will going to do the best that it's going to do. Okay. Let's be perfectly honest. You got a tough row to hoe with Macrophyllas in your climate. I hate to say that to you, but you do. And I think if you do your pinching in the summer, you're going to do better. I really do. And it isn't the case you're going to cut everything down. You got good looking blossoms, you leave them. Okay. Please understand that you're not pruning the whole plant necessarily just out of being arbitrary of pinching the whole thing. You don't do that.
Okay.
If your plants, and some plants you have that in their shade, you might get the antique season that for us works out so well. So, and for you, you're still growing in October, even though the photo period is being reduced, days are getting shorter. I've seen your plants. They're still vital in October, where for us it's pretty much over.
Yeah.
So you do get that. You got a long growing season.
We do. So anyone else have any questions for the chat? I think I've got covered them all.
Well, that's great.
But if anybody had anything else, but we appreciate you. The thing I learned tonight is to break my pruning down into that first pruning I did all as one. And now I need to break it into 2. I think that's the lesson, because I did go out there in March to prune out dead wood, old peeling dead wood. And right. I did invariably would see new growth and blossom potentials that I would break off in the process of doing that.
You can't do that.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to try to go to what you said, is do 1 early pruning for the dead wood.
Yep.
A second pruning for additional.
Make it look good for the principal.
Yeah.
Make it look good for the principal blooming time.
Right. Yeah.
And then,
it is because
the
second pruning is dead wood also, but it's not dead wood down to the base. It's dead wood killed by the cold.
It's what we call winter kill. Yeah, stem winter kill.
Right. Yep. Okay.
No.
All right.
And listen, I will be, just so everybody knows, I will be sending Linda to you. Might even come tonight, if not in the morning. I'm going to send you a PDF of all the slides.
Okay.
And you can make that available to your members. And I think that'll help them. They don't need to print it. They can just keep it as a reference and look at things on here as the time of year suggests that they have a look.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all for participating tonight. And thank you, Mal, for coming. It's always nice to see you. I'm sorry. We would love to see you in person, but we can't. But maybe next year. Yeah, we got to keep our fingers crossed. I think it'll eventually get better. I'd like it to be sooner rather than later. I'm getting too old to wait too long. So. I know. I feel the same way. I think we all know that, don't we? Okay. Yeah, we all are. Nice seeing everybody. All the best to you. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye. All right. Okay. Let me see here.